are you eager to know the second half of the story? Let's not waste any more time and get started. The death on a diagonal lane, the revelation. The second astrologer Mohit went to did not look like a typical astrologer. He wore a normal dhoti and applied vermilion on his forehead. A strange aura emanated from him. Mohit could feel a sense of peace as soon as he saw the astrologer. "What ails you?" asked the astrologer. His face was serene, not a hint of greed or anger. Mohit began explaining his problem. The accident, his loss, a sense of fear, and the presence of a spirit in their new house had unnerved the kids and Mohit. He was already grieving her loss and was unprepared for this kind of spiritual presence. Mohit continued, desperation visible in his voice. "But we are clueless as to what is happening," he finished. For some reason, Mohit wanted to tell everything to this astrologer. It was like once he had spoken his heart out, a strange, soothing aura of the astrologer engulfed him and gave him solace. Mohit felt reassured looking at him. He did not speak much and was engrossed in his puja. After a few minutes into the puja, he began meditating and spoke without opening his eyes. "You have the solution with you. It needs a learned eye to unscrew." Mohit remembered he had pocketed the map and suddenly, out of impulse, handed it over to the astrologer. The learned astrologer took it and opened his eyes. He turned it over and began looking with a magnifying glass. After about half an hour, he looked up and spoke. "Her soul is cursed with the death on the diagonal lane. That happened many years ago. Do you see the lane marked in red? Have you visited the place? Your wife died at this spot, which is cursed. Her soul lives on forever in a delusion without finding peace. The only way to free her soul is to burn the evidence of the curse. It has weakened over time, which is why her soul sees partial truth. I will burn this in the sacred fire. Meanwhile, you can continue the sessions with the doctor. It will help her see the real truth," concluded the astrologer. Akanksha was crying bitterly at her counseling session. "All this while I was seeing myself," she sobbed loudly, covering her face with her hands. All her family members were sitting with the famed psychic doctor. This doctor was famous for his ability to communicate with dead people. He had counseled many spirits into moving on. Akanksha's spirit had wandered around the children and Mohit, assuming she was alive, under the influence of the curse. Now that she realized she was dead, she couldn't control her grief. "I had so many dreams to fulfill. I feel there is a lot that is unsaid, that I wish to do. Suddenly you tell me it is the end?" She sounded dejected. "This is not the end. It is the beginning of a new journey. Your soul must move on, find a new purpose," said the doctor. Akanksha stopped crying, and the final words, "find a new purpose," was echoing in her ears. Suddenly a burst of light hit her, and she knew what to do. She had finally found the path. She watched her husband and the kids looking at her. At that moment, she had found her truth and solitude. The doctor smiled and waved goodbye. He asked the kids to do the same. "Tell my family I will always cherish the time spent with them," were her last words. Had you guessed that it was Akanksha haunting her family? With this episode, I wanted to make a point. If a doctor somewhere in the West talks to spirits and help them move over, people would love to hear about it. A similar thing from astrologers who are learned in a science that predicts eclipses to the last minute without consulting NASA are mocked at and taunted. Why so? Astrology is a sacred science. I hope everybody begins to look at it that way.